Story time about my extremely creepy neighbors. So a little background information, I was 12 years old and I was in 6th grade. And my family and I lived in a really small town where everyone knew everyone. But our new neighbors had been building their house next to us for the past 4 years. And finally when they were done with the house, this house was huge. I mean, probably because there were like 8 people moving into the house. There was the mom, the dad, 4 kids, and their grandparents. So like 8 people. But I was super excited because I was like, okay, this is awesome. I get to meet some new friends. But after 2 weeks of not seeing anybody playing in the backyard or anybody on the school bus, I started to think that their family was super fucking weird. And everyone in our neighborhood liked to gossip, and everyone was saying how they barely see the people who had just moved in. So my mom decided to take one for the team and make some brownies, take them over to the house, and I ended up going with her. So we go up to the house, we knock on the door, and one of the kids came and opened the door, but the dad ran over and grabbed him. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my extremely creepy neighbors. So like I said, my mom and I took some brownies over there and one of the kids opened the door, and when he opened the door, he had a bunch of bruises all over his body. The dad came running over and ripped his son from the door and slammed the door in our faces, and all you could hear was him screaming at his son. So my mom and I went to walk away before the door opened, and he was like, sorry, my son knows better than to open the door to strangers. We took the brownies, and then I asked him if I could have a sleepover with one of his daughters, and he was super hesitant at first, but he said that I could only have a sleepover with her if it was at my house and not theirs, which my mom was completely fine with anyways, because she thought that it was a little bit weird that his son had bruises covering his whole body. So that night when she came over to sleep over my house, I asked her how her brother got all those bruises all over his body, and she said that he just fell down some stairs. But after that we became best friends, and we would literally hang out like 5 times a week, until the one day I knocked on their door to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. Like for part 3 about my super creepy neighbors. So like I said, I became best friends with their daughter, but the one day I went over her house to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. And when I asked when she would be back, he was like, she went to go live with her mom, so probably never. Which was super weird because she never mentioned that she had another mom. So fast forward 2 months, my family and I are sitting around the fire pit when we hear someone scream help. But we weren't sure if that's what we were actually hearing because it was so quiet, and then all of a sudden we heard someone banging on my neighbor's basement door. You know those metal doors that people usually have outside of their house that lead down basement steps? Yeah, well that's where the banging was coming from. So my dad hopped over the fence to see if that's where the screaming was coming from also. And then not even a minute later, my dad hopped back over the fence and it looked like he saw a ghost, but he ran inside, called 911. Because I was so young, the only thing my parents told me about that whole situation was that the girl that I was friends with was still alive and her parents were keeping her in the basement along with 2 of her other siblings. But then we also found out that they weren't even her real parents. They were kidnapped at the hospital when they were born.
Story time of how I caught my grandma and my dad sleeping together. Yes, you heard me right, my dad was sleeping with my grandma.
Sadly, I had to be the one to find this out and walk in on them doing the dirty, and it was probably the most traumatizing experience I've ever had. So basically, my dad told my mom that he had to start working late to get extra money, because at the time we weren't doing so good money-wise. So basically, a couple months go by, and my mom said he started acting really weird, and then asked me to keep an eye on him and see if he's like doing anything strange. So you know me, the best daughter in the world, kept an eye on him, and I didn't find much out. Until one day, after I came home from school, I got locked out of my house because I didn't have my key, and both of my parents were so called at work. So I told my mom, and she works an hour away, so she couldn't come get me. And so I just had a friend drop me off at my grandma's house. So I tried calling my grandma, but she didn't answer, so I decided I was just gonna go anyways. I go through the back door like I always do, and I wanted to sneak up on her and give her a hug. So I try to be as quiet as I can, and I walk in the room and see my grandma and my dad butt naked on the bed. I'm running out of time. Like for part 2.
About how my boyfriend and best friend were sneaking around behind my back. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade. So my mom and dad were split up and I was pretty much allowed to do whatever I wanted because of that. So I was dating this boy named Jacob. Well, my best friend Alice literally hated him. Like low-key, every once in a while, she would try to break him and I up, and when I would call her out on it, she would just deny it. Anyway, so the one day I didn't go to school because I was super sick. So the whole day I was trying to text Jacob and Allison, but nobody was answering me, which was extremely weird because no matter what, Allison would always text me back. So after I knew the school ended, I went to Allison's house. Nobody was answering the door, so I used the spare key. I walk in and all I hear is a very loud banging coming from her bedroom. So I walk in, I see my boyfriend and her together, and then he starts saying that she drugged him. So I went on his phone, I see a bunch of old text messages between him and her, and them exchanging pictures. And then sis wants to start giving me an attitude, so I punched her in the face, and then I left and I don't talk to either of them.
Story time. So when I was in high school, my English teacher was trying to teach us some lesson. It was an introduction to whatever book we were reading. I don't remember. But she split up our class into 2 sections. This team got really easy questions. This team got the same type of questions, but they were more difficult. So for example, this team would get like a multiplication question. What is 5 times 3? The other team, the team that I was on, would then get a difficult version of the same question. So what is 63 times 19? Both of them are multiplication. One is clearly easier. But that was like the whole point, right? So when it's my turn, I go up to the front of the class, and the teacher turns to the other student, the easy team student, and asks to say her alphabet as fast as possible. I'm pretty sure the student took like 13 seconds to say the alphabet, just said the alphabet, right? Teacher turns to me and goes, all right, now I need you to say your alphabet backwards as fast as possible. It was at this moment in my young life that the sky opened up, the sun shone down directly on me, because little did this teacher know that I was prepared for this question. You see, when I was in the 2nd grade, I got sick for like a full week and I had to stay home. And while I was at home, there was a poster of the alphabet on the back of my bedroom door. And so what did I do? I memorized it backwards in the 2nd grade. Is there a logical reason that I did this? No, I was sick, and in my head I was like, that'd be a fun party trick if I could say the alphabet backwards. So the teacher turns to me and she goes, I'll give you a second. And I'm like, I'm ready. Start the timer. She's like, okay. Starts the timer. I whip through my alphabet backwards faster than anybody has ever done it. Her face shocked. It was amazing. The entire class claps because who can do that? I do like a little like, and go back and sit down. Did I kind of ruin the lesson that this teacher was trying to portray? Yes. But I was so prepared, and if you want to hear me say my alphabet backwards, leave a comment, because I will. I can do it so fast.
Let me tell you my most embarrassing story. I was in year 7, so I was like 11, 12 maybe, and I need a wee. So I go to the toilet, I'm weeing, and then a group of girls come in, and I knew from their voices, I was like, shit, because these girls, they were older than me, and they shat the life out of me. I knew it was go time. I sat in that stall, and I braced myself. Oh my god, it sounds like an elephant is pissing. Her piss is so loud. It gets worse. Maybe she needs some water because it fucking stinks in here. I was being bullied at the time as well for being ginger and ugly and weird, because I was. And so I just cried. Oh my god, is she crying? That's so embarrassing. When I tell you I wanted to be flushed down that toilet, I've never wanted to die more in my life. That's not true actually, but anyway. So I go back to form. I'm trying to hide my tears to make sure no one sees me, because me crying was a daily occurrence at that point. Miss Pennock sees it straight away. Big up Miss Pennock, love you. She's like, you're crying, who made you cry? And I'm like, no Miss Pennock, this one's really embarrassing, I don't want to talk about it. Who made you cry? And I'm like, so she runs, she sprints down the corridor, tells head of fucking house. The girls get detention, but this is the best part. When they're in detention, all they had to do for 2 hours was write me apology letters for saying that my piss stank. They had to write formal apology letters on proper, perfect paper in envelopes, saying, I'm sorry I took the piss out of your piss. And I received them the next day, sat on my fucking desk, like, welcome back to your nightmare of secondary school. Here's the letters of people apologising for taking the piss out of your piss. I still have them. They are somewhere. I saw them the other day, and that's why I'm telling you the story, because I was like, oh, I forgot about that. That's my story about some group of girls taking the piss out of me. Yeah, quite literally. If you're watching this, I hope you're doing well. I drink more water now.
One day me and my classmates were on a Zoom call with our teacher for science. We kept writing WAP in the chat and our teacher had enough and said, what is WAP? Why does everyone keep saying it? This guy in our class said it stands for work and paper. The guy said we were doing our WAP right now and our teacher said great. Our teacher then said, Jennifer, show me your WAP right now. We all started laughing and our teacher was confused. He kept saying, why won't you show me your WAP? We were all dying from laughter and our teacher got upset and left the Zoom call. We all sat there kinda speechless and we all just sorta left one by one after. And I went back to school after they reopened and had English first period. We were all talking about WAP and our English teacher said, "What does WAP mean?" The class went silent and I said out loud, "It stands for write a poem." My teacher said that's a brilliant idea and she wouldn't stop saying WAP after. The next day we go back to school to see WAP posters in every English classroom saying write a poem. This girl told the teacher after class what it really meant, but the school kept them up because they liked the posters and what they stood for.
Story time about my touchy English teacher. And no, he did not get fired. He still works at that same school till this day. Let's get into it. This happened when I was a senior in high school, literally last year. His class was the new English class that I switched to because my other English teacher wasn't teaching me shit. So I went to the office and asked if I could switch my classes and they said yes. But only if I was willing to drop honors English and do regular English. And I also would have to be in a freshman class. I was honestly willing to do whatever to get out the class, so I was like, sure. And now I honestly wish I didn't because of this. So it first started off with him being super nice to me, which was kind of weird because I never really talked to him before. He made me like a class leader just because I was older. And every single time I walked into his classroom, he would try to talk to me. Like, not even about school, literally about anything. I didn't think that was weird. I was guessing he talked to me so much because I was older and we could relate on more stuff. This is when things started taking a turn for the worse. During tests or quizzes, he would walk around the classroom and he would always make his way back to me just so he could rub my shoulders. Or he would run his fingers through my hair. That was the biggest red flag. Then he asked me to stay after school for extra credit, like for part 2. Part 2 of my touchy English teacher. Some things I would like to add from the last video. I never had him as a teacher before, not even freshman year. I moved to that school when I was a sophomore. They told me that he was known to be creepy, and that so many girls have complained about him making them uncomfortable. But they were just rumors, so I didn't think that much of it. Till that man started rubbing my shoulders in class. And it's the fact that he rubbed my shoulders and nobody else's. I was not 18, I was still 17 years old. I just started senior year. Back to the story. He asked me to stay after school for extra credit. He said he wanted me to help him set up a project for his students, and he doesn't know what young kids like, and apparently every freshman in his class had something to do after school, so I had to do it. But since he said he would give me extra credit, I was like, okay, sure. And I definitely didn't think that this would happen. So my last class was forensics, so after school I went to his classroom. He didn't have any supplies out or anything, so I was like, what project? He tells me to reach on top of a shelf behind his desk. He was literally sitting at his desk, he could have done it himself. So I was like, okay, but as soon as I reach up on that shelf, he gets up and grabs my ass. Like for part 3, because it only gets worse from here. This is part 3 of my touchy English teacher. So like I said, he asked me to get something off of the shelf behind his desk while he was sitting at his desk, and as soon as I go up to grab it, he grabs my ass. He literally stood up to grab it. And then I spun around and started looking at him crazy. Well, after he grabbed my butt, he kept walking as if his arm just brushed up against my ass. And he looked back at me and he was like, is everything okay? Okay, so we're just gonna act like he didn't just do what he just did. But I just looked at him and I was like, everything's okay. I told him that I had just gotten a text from my mom and an emergency happened, so I had to go home. But instead of going home, I went to a friend's house, and it was the same friend who told me all the rumors of that teacher being a creep. I went to a friend's house instead of going straight home because I was crying really hard and I didn't want my parents to be concerned, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to tell them what happened or not. I was only crying because I felt super uncomfortable and I didn't know what else to do. When I got to my friend's house, she told me that she would go to the office with me at school the next day. So the next day came and we went to the office. Well, this is what they said when we told them what happened, like for part 4.